Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today I have Corey with me, who is one of our peaceful parenting coaches at Reimagine Peaceful Parenting. By the way, if you have not checked out our new website yet, it's really beautiful. It's got a ton of free resources on it. And we were going to do like a whole launch thing. And I don't know, Corey and I just never got around to it. So Corey, here's the launch episode of our new, I didn't even know I was going to say this until I started recording, but check out our new website, reimaginepeacefulparenting.com. And it's really, really nicely organized and has, as I said, all the free resources on it. And I'm really happy with it and with our new sort of it's not the Sarah show. It's all of us here at Reimagine Peaceful Parenting. So check it out. Anyhow, Corey Everett, you know her, I think, from previous podcasts, from our Facebook group, and as one of the peaceful parenting coaches. So Corey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me again. And you know what? We didn't discuss it, but this is the perfect launch topic because we are reimagining what it means to be a peaceful parent.
Totally. And so what we're talking about today is that Corey and I have both noticed that there's a backlash starting against peaceful parenting, or that's been going on for a little while now. And, whenever there's a new idea that gains traction in our society, you can expect that there will be a backlash against it. So I'm not surprised, but basically what we're noticing is that in this backlash, people are getting it wrong. They have the wrong impression of what peaceful parenting is. And a lot of people are talking about, gentle parenting. And for our purposes, there are very slight differences between peaceful parenting, responsive parenting, conscious parenting, gentle parenting, positive discipline. But let's say they can all sit nicely in the same bucket together. So we're going to talk about peaceful parenting, although some of the criticisms that have been levied against it, people are saying this is what's wrong with gentle parenting. So what we wanted to do was just Corey and I made a list there have been several major influencers who have dedicated, video series, books, podcast episodes to everything that's wrong with gentle parenting or peaceful parenting. And we're listening to them and wanting to scratch our eyes out because it's or our ears, I guess. So we're listening to this and both of us are texting each other oh my gosh, can you believe what they're saying? And I think it's called a straw man argument in logic, where you make a fake position and then tear it down. So I'm going to assume that people have the best of intentions and that they just don't understand what peaceful parenting is. So Corey and I are going to go through. Corey, do you want to take the first one? We've got a list of 8 things that we noticed that people are getting wrong about peaceful parenting, but we just want to make sure that you all are not getting confused and thinking that peaceful parenting is something that it's not. So do you want to take the first one, Corey?
Sure. And before I do that, I just want to agree with you that I really want to believe that everyone does have the best intentions with this. I think it just can get really hard when we're taking in all this information all the time on just little snippets on social media and things. So hopefully even for those people, this can clarify it for them if they're listening.
Yeah. And just to your point about the snippets on social media, I mean, for so long, people have been saying you have to do videos, but I find it so hard to distill the essence of what we do in 90 seconds, right? So I think that's part of the problem too, is that there's a lot of nuance lost when you're getting your information from TikTok Reels or Instagram Reels, that just, you can't get the nuance of the approach, which is why, I think it's really important to get your information from people who have a lot of experience like us, people who have been doing this for a long time, and not just people who are good at making videos. Because I think there are people who are very good at making videos and they have, a million followers or whatever, but they don't necessarily have the experience or the training or the education behind them in terms of the approach. So yeah, things get lost in the nuance. And also I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Again, I think with the good intentions, but there are a lot of people who they learn a little bit and then they think that they can, tell other people what to do. So, okay. So
Yes.
to go with our first one. This is
So our
probably one of
first
the
one.
biggest ones.
It is. So there's this misconception that you need to be calm all the time if you are a peaceful parent. And, I think in almost every coaching call I do, I end up saying the line, we were brought up in a generation that often said, do as I say, not as I do, right? And it's actually the opposite, right? That like kids end up being whatever we are. So when we talk about being calm, we're just trying to model and regulate nervous systems and show our children be who we want our children to be, because that's what they're going to end up doing. And we don't want our children to be perfectly calm creatures all the time. We want them to be emotionally healthy, which means they know how to feel their feelings. And if they get upset, they know how to calm themselves down.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is that it's not that you have to be calm all the time. It's that you learn about your nervous system so that you can recognize when you're getting upset and hijacked, and also listen to the message that's telling you, like, I need to do something different here because I'm getting really frustrated and annoyed, right? Or I'm chronically frustrated and annoyed and I need to do something different. But to be able to recognize that and know what to do to help yourself, right? To know how to get back to calm. And again, as you said, the goal is not to be calm all the time. Like, we're going to have ups and downs, but that we want to learn about, our nervous system and our emotions so that we can, respond to what's going on in the moment rather than just reacting like crazy left and right.
Yes. And so much of when I've heard this kind of like out in the world is they're like, what kind of message is that sending to our children that we are just calm all of the time? And exactly, that isn't a good message. We do want to like model that it's totally normal and healthy to have feelings. But what's not healthy is to take your feelings and throw them all over another person.
Yeah. And to take them out on somebody else.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
So I think that's where I tell all the parents I work with, it's so beautiful to model to our children being emotionally healthy adults. And that means having a whole range of emotions, but knowing how to feel them and handle them.
Yeah.
And being calm when we need to be.
Yeah. And also it's not about like pushing down your feelings to look like you're calm, right? I mean,
Yes.
first of all, it doesn't work because the nervous systems are always, and actually that's one of the arguments, and one of the people said that they're like calm on the outside but furious on the inside. And that's not our goal either, right? It's not that we just want to look like we're calm, because it's not healthy, as you said. Like, we want to model emotional health. It's not healthy to be stuffing your feelings. But your kid will know also if you're actually not calm, even if you're acting calm on the outside, right? So it's really like truly understanding your emotional responses to things and how to regulate yourself, not just like faking it.
Yes. I remember we did a post once where we say that whole idea, fake it till you make it, is just so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one can actually fake it, and we don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
As Ned Johnson and William Sixford say in The Self-Driven Child, we need to be a true non-anxious presence.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that, we really do have to like manage our own feelings, not just pretend.
Yeah, totally. And I think, it would be, we sort of like hinted at this, but it's unrealistic to think that you're never going to get frustrated or upset, right? Like, it's not being that first principle of peaceful parenting, that focus on parental self-regulation, does not mean, I've said this a million times, it doesn't mean that you never get upset. It's that you commit to trying to recognize when you are upset and to do something about it and calming yourself. And then, of course, like, the thing that we always have to say is, like, it's inevitable that you are going to get upset. You're going to yell at your kids, nobody's perfect. And then you do a repair, right?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
We don't
Okay,
need to be.
so number one myth, that you need to be calm all the time to be a peaceful parent. The second thing that I've been seeing a lot is that, so there used to be the idea that the parents' needs and preferences were more important than the child's needs and preferences, right? I mean, and that's still true a lot in, conventional parenting. And I think that people have flipped that in their misinterpretation of peaceful parenting, where they now think that it's not good to have the parents' needs and preferences be more important than the child's. So now let's make the child's needs and preferences more important than the parents'. And that's wrong too, right? It's not that somebody's needs and preferences, and of course, sometimes you do have to put your child's needs and preferences first, like babies who wake up inconveniently in the middle of the night and need to be fed. Like, yes, I would rather sleep through the night than have to wake up with a baby, but that's a case where you do have to put them first. Or like, a sick child or whatever. There are times where yes, you do have to put them first, but that it's not that one person's needs are prioritized. It's a teamwork thing. Like it's that
Yes.
we try to find a way that we validate everybody's needs and preferences. I know that sounds so like La La Land kind of like, unrealistic, but most of the time you can figure out a way to make things work for everybody.
Yes. I think that's so important because it's like what you're saying here is they used to, my words are not coming right now. There is this idea in order to be a good parent, you need to be a martyr. And I just find that's just as problematic as, running the show and being super controlling and your children need to do what you're doing. We need to really understand that. Of course, when you have children, their needs are going to be really big, but it is possible to work together to find a solution where we can meet most needs. Maybe not perfectly,
Yeah.
but
I mean,
there's
that's
a
such a
way to
good point. That because there are times where like, okay, I need to take a shower. I mean, this is not me today, but this actually was an example of someone asked me this question once of like, my 3-year-old just wants me to play with them all the time and I'm a single parent and sometimes I need to, take a shower and my 3-year-old doesn't want me to. I'm like, it's okay if your 3-year-old is upset if you and I know we're going to touch on this more later, but your needs matter, right? Like you need to take a shower and you need that time and, whatever. It's okay if your 3-year-old cries because they want you to play with them and you want to take a shower. So then that's not exactly a teamwork thing, but that's like recognizing like your needs do matter. And so I guess that's the key is like sometimes your needs matter more. Sometimes your child's needs matter more. Sometimes you can find a teamwork way to make everybody's needs matter. So it's that getting away from that black and white of, this person's needs are more important. No, this person's needs are more important. It's like, it's that nuance again, right?
Yeah, that's so important. What really stood out to me, I heard one influencer talking about this in the case of, say, cleaning, where like we need to get the house cleaned. And there's this feeling that if a child's having a meltdown, well, then that comes before anything else that you're doing. You must drop everything you're doing to meet the needs of that child. And I so deeply feel for the influencers that were talking about that, because when you have a young family, it can feel almost impossible to meet everyone's needs.
Mhm.
There's moments where you just feel like you're drowning in this to-do list, and now this child's having a meltdown, and I feel like gentle parenting's telling me that I need to deal with that, and I'm never going to get this house clean. It can feel like that. But I think this is where we got to get back to what we said at the beginning with the nuance is it's actually not just about what's happening in that moment. It's also about, okay, how do we handle this in the moment? But also, what are all the things we're doing all around this moment to not maybe even end up in that place in the first place? And I think that's where we're really missing the point here with meeting needs.
Mhm.
Because in order to not end up in this situation, maybe we need to meet that child's needs with some play before we try and clean.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Like front
maybe
load it.
yes, exactly, front load it. Or maybe we do need to just drop some standards for a little while about how clean things are. Or maybe we need to be, doing some problem solving with this family, but how they can get more support.
Mhm.
So it's just meeting needs is so much more complicated than just what's happening in a moment. It's just everything that's happening around that.
And when I heard that example, the exact one that you said about, am I supposed to just stop vacuuming if my child's having a meltdown? I have to say though, part of me was like, yes. Like, what's more important? Like getting the vacuuming done? I mean, okay, maybe if your mother-in-law is coming to visit and your mother-in-law is going to be there in half an hour, you really do have to finish the vacuuming, even if your child's having a meltdown. But what is, a child having a meltdown is usually like kind of that late stage, I need you, right? And
Yeah.
kids are not manipulative. Like, I mean, they do what they need to get their needs met, but it's pretty rare for a kid to like have a meltdown on purpose to get you to stop vacuuming. But yeah, part of me was just like, yeah, stop vacuuming if your kid needs you. But I think I like the way you framed it, which is looking like zooming out and looking at the whole big picture of like how did we get to this position?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, because it can be so much more complicated. I think that's part of what's hard about this backlash is everything's so much more complicated than people make it think. Is it really about needing attention, or maybe is it a kid who can't handle the sound of vacuums?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
there's
Oh, that's
so
another good point.
much
Yeah.
that, like, I think that's why there's still such an important role for us pitch here for doing one-on-one coaching, because we could spend an hour on this vacuuming scenario
Yes.
to try and problem solve in the moment how we
Yeah.
handle it, but all the big picture things. And there's so many layers that we could explore there. And I think that's what's really missing in this discussion.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that it's again, it's like that danger of the binary, like the either or. Like it's either this, it's either my house is clean or I meet my child's needs. And again, it's that like the teamwork thing. And just, one little thing, you're right. You could spend an hour on this scenario, right? And that's why in coaching, we're always like, bring us scenarios that these are like the best ways to help figure out what's going on. But maybe the kid, you could vacuum together. Like maybe you find a way, like, back to our episode with Michaeline Duclef about the hunt gather parent episode, where she talks about involving your children in like your daily life, right? It's not that parent does all the cleaning while the child plays. It's like, how do we involve kids in our daily life? And that's, raising helpers, right?
Yes, absolutely. I remember when I had a little one, he had such a need for movement. I did all of my vacuuming whenever I needed him to sleep. And
Mm.
I put him on the carrier, and the sound and the movement would put him to sleep. Win-win. We got a nap. We got the whole house clean.
I think I just didn't. So my parents once were visiting me and gave me this like incredible backhanded compliment. And I forget which one of them said this, but it was like, your other parent and I were talking, and we just both really admire how you prioritize doing things with the kids over cleaning your house. It was like a very nice way of saying, like, your house is really messy and dirty. Ah,
But these are also like moments in time. I think that's also what's hard about this conversation is some of this discussion on how gentle parenting is, this is actually bringing us to our next one about it not being realistic, is it's not always going to be this way. There's seasons in your parenting where your kids' needs are more intense and it is harder to meet your needs. And then there's other seasons where it's so much easier to meet everyone's needs too. So just because one season it's you're finding hard to find that balance doesn't mean it's always going to be like that.
yeah. And honestly, it's the payoff too. Like, I'm in that post active parenting stage. My kids are like super helpful and like they do a lot for us and they're really, really sweet. And like, the other day I came home and my daughter she'd cleaned the whole kitchen. Like, and I was like, oh, thanks. And it was so funny because I said, did you see Maxine clean the kitchen? While I was out. And she's like, my husband said, yeah, I figured that wasn't you. So let's move on to it's not realistic or possible. I mean, I think that again is like the straw man argument of like maybe your Instagram influencer picture of like the house is perfectly clean and the mom is dressed in this beautiful dress and the children are clean and dressed up and everyone's like sitting around doing a puzzle together and the dog is lying in front of the fireplace. If that's your idea of gentle parenting or peaceful parenting, yes, that's not possible. But I think again, it's like they're setting up this ideal and then saying, oh, the ideal isn't possible because life is messy. So yes, peaceful parenting is possible. I mean, you and I are living it. The clients that we work with, the people in our membership and in our Facebook group are all living it, but it's not like this beautiful, neat little like Hallmark card vision.
Exactly. I remember talking to a bunch of our members one day and someone said, I'm just never going to be like you and Sarah. I'm just never going to be perfectly calm all the time. And I was like, okay, let me tell you, this is a perfect example. Like I am not perfectly calm all the time. I mess up all the time. That's not what this is about. Right. And so I think it is really easy for people to think, I actually kind of love that new trend. Have you seen on Instagram where people are like, it's just a highlight reel, but what are the real struggles I'm having in the background? This is a new trend where people are posting all the struggles they're having that they don't normally post about.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, and I love it because I think that that's so true that we really are getting caught up on the ideal version of this, but the real version is really messy floors and
Mhm. Mhm.
and people losing their cool and then repairing and trying to do better, right? It's a lot messier. You've said this before too. Peaceful parenting is messy emotionally because these are kids who let it all hang out. So it's not
Mhm.
just our houses that can be a bit messy when this is actually happening.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you do have that but the perfect ideal, of course, yes, that isn't possible or realistic, but if you have the realistic idea of peaceful parenting that there are good moments, there are bad moments, we repair, we move on, we have highs, we have lows, like just like everyone else. And what I think what's important to keep in mind is that it's not perfection, it's intention, right? It's intention that we're always looking to like try to regulate ourselves, try to focus on the relationship and connect, try to support our kids when they're not meeting our expectations. So it's not the outcome that is peaceful parenting, it's the journey, right? Yeah. All right. Well, the next one, it's not one size fits all. This just came up. I'm going to let you take this because before we started recording, you had said we had this real life example of this yesterday in our Facebook group. So why don't you take that? Basically, I think we're saying like there's not like one way to do it, one way to do peaceful parenting.
This might be the thing that gets me the most wound up. And actually, this is the thing I'm most proud of us about. If I'm going to toot our own horns today, is that there is this idea that, there's one way to do everything. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing it right. And the whole reason we have a podcast is because we bring in experts who have all different perspectives, and every guest is telling us a slightly different way that we could approach things. And I think that's so important. I think it's a real red flag if any sort of expert is telling you, you need to just do it this one way. And if you're not doing it that way, you're failing. All people are different. So for any one problem that's coming up, there's going to be lots of answers and possible routes that you can take to try and work through that problem.
Hmm. Yeah. The person in the conflict in our Facebook group was somebody who was saying that screens are bad and always problematic and kids should never be on screens. And well, you and I both always like if somebody's having issues, screens are one of the things that we're going to look at. Like how much time does your child spend on screens? How do screens affect your child? But what we're learning is that exactly there's not one like it you can't say children should never be on screens or children should always have I mean those are the two extremes. Unlimited screen time on the one end and never screens on the other end. And for every child and every family, they're going to be somewhere on that continuum and it's still peaceful parenting, right? Like it's not that, peaceful parenting is against screens. No, screens can be very useful tools and they can also be very destructive and dysregulating. And I mentioned this to the person we were having the argument with when I interviewed Dr. Stuart Shanker, who's a real expert on children's behavior and the nervous system. When I interviewed him for the summit, I asked him about screens and I was expecting him to say that screens are dysregulating and should be avoided because of something else that he had just said. And he said, well, you have to look at the child and the situation. Screens can sometimes be very regulating for children, and screens can sometimes be very dysregulating for children. Sorry, we're going off on a screen tangent, or I am at least, but just to be the example of like, it's not black and white, right? Like, there are some things that work for some families and of course, we're talking about things that are within the peaceful parenting umbrella, right? We're not going to say, you know, punishment is great for some families and not others, because that really is outside of the peaceful parenting approach. But within the approach, again, it's that nuance piece, right? And it's not black and white. I was just talking to a mom. I think that the podcast will come out after this one, but she was like really worried that something that she was doing with her daughter, she was going to tell me about it. And I was going to say, no, that's wrong and bad. It was like a reward system that they had come up with. I'm like, well, I can see how that's really working for you right now. And I quoted you and I said, as Corey always says, we're not the peaceful parenting police.
Yes. See, I have a long history of being very worked up about this one as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's so interesting because in my house, this screen one really got me talking even in my own house. And I have two children who are so different with screens. I have one who, if he has a chance to watch a little bit of TV, a great show like Bluey, perhaps, he'll come out of that feeling refreshed and ready to go as long as we don't go too long. I have another child trying to watch TV. He comes out so annoyed and needs to go jump on the trampoline for 15 minutes because it's hard on him.
Mhm.
Whereas the one who can't watch TV, if he can play a couple minutes of video games, he comes out feeling great. The other one, you put him near video games and we're in trouble for the rest of the day.
Right.
So I think it's so important that and this is just on screens, right?
Yeah.
For everything, we need to really have open minds and know that there's so many options within the realm of peaceful parenting and so many tools that we can take to try with different children. Dr. Stuart Jenkert says, be a stress detective.
That's right. Yeah, this reminds me so much. This backlash, I think I mentioned this to you before, reminds me of the backlash that came against attachment parenting. So attachment parenting came out, was like super fringy, got popularized, and then the backlash was actually against the misconceptions. Again, there was a couple of funny ones. There was this movie, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but the character in the movie, the people in the movie were visiting their friends who were attachment parents. And they noticed that the people didn't have a stroller, and they thought it was because that they didn't have enough money. So as like a guest gift, they're like, they went out and bought them a stroller and gave it to their friends. And their friends were like, get this thing out of my house. Do you want me to push my child away from me? And like there was this like send up of like that, you're only supposed to do baby wearing, right? And that strollers were evil. But again, that's like such a misconception. My dad also had said to me, my dad's a psychologist, and he had these clients who were practicing attachment parenting, they said in quotes, and they had never, ever left their child with anyone else. They wouldn't let the grandparents babysit them. And the mother said, it's because we want to make sure we have a secure attachment. So we're not going to leave our child with anyone else ever. And I was like, believe me, Dad, that is not really what attachment parenting is. Like, so I think it's like this thing again of like, if you don't understand what it is, you're going to have like a strong reaction to your wrong idea of what it is.
Yes, yes. And we often say that actually this would be good to go to the one about peaceful parenting is about never making your children feel bad and shielding them from all pain, right? It's kind of a big thing there is we think it's all about like, we want to have these calm, happy, perfect children and never let them have a negative experience. And that is also really a big misconception.
Yeah, this person who has a book out said, apparently has a chapter, I just heard about it on a podcast, but apparently has a chapter where she talks about where she thinks that gentle parenting is to remove all obstacles and hardship from your children's life and to make sure that they never, ever feel bad, which is is so far from the reality of what peaceful parenting is. Because, we talk about this all the time. Sometimes you do have to set limits that your kids are going to be unhappy about, right? Or there are things that just happen in their lives that they will be unhappy about. And we can't prevent that. We just have to, going back to our first thing we're talking about, the emotional healthiness and emotional intelligence, part of how kids develop resilience is through going through hardship, right? And coming out the other side. Resilience is not that you never get upset about anything. Resilience is that you get upset and then you recover. So it would not be healthy for kids to never experience hardship or difficult feelings, right? Or that we do everything, we bend over backwards to make sure that our children never are upset or feel bad. I mean, can you imagine what that would look like? Maybe there are some parents who are misinterpreting it and hopefully they'll hear this and know that peaceful parenting does not mean that your child will never be unhappy.
You're going to have very anxious children if you try and prevent them from experiencing any sort of hardship, right?
Yeah, and entitled. And, people always, when, we talk so much about being flexible and trying to, when you can to, go do things that are your child's preferences or desires or whatever. But and people are always like, well, won't my child be spoiled? Well, spoiled is what the parents do, not what the children are. Like if the only way you spoil your kids is if you're always going against your own values and your own limits that you think are a good idea because you don't want your child to be upset. Like that's where spoiling comes in, is when something's not a great idea, but you can't tolerate their unhappiness, so you give in, right? Which is another point that some influencers are making, is that peaceful parenting is the same as permissive parenting. So permissive parenting is basically when you don't have any boundaries or limits with your kids. ostensibly, I think a big reason people do that is because they don't want their kids to be unhappy. But it's not the same thing at all. Like peaceful parenting is giving your kids the support that they need to meet your expectations, not throwing your expectations out the window.
Yes, exactly. Okay, the next important one is peaceful parenting is not just a bunch of scripts. We are not robots.
Yes. And I think that's what people, scripts can be helpful. I know Ned and Bill's newest book, What Do You Say, has ideas of like different conversations, but it's not that you like memorize the scripts and then you just say those things to your kids. I mean, the one that I see all the time in coaching, and I don't know if you see this too, Corey, is parents who treat empathy as a script where they think, well, I said, you must be so sad about that. And my kid just, didn't respond in the way that you said they were going to respond. And I'm always like, well, when you were saying those words of empathy, how were you feeling? Well, I was feeling really pissed off and frustrated. Well, that's not empathy, right? So if you do try to just use the quote scripts that people are saying that are out there, but you don't actually believe what you're saying, or you don't have the understanding of, what the point is, then of course it's just going to feel like you're a robot.
Yes, it's so much more important about what you're feeling than what you're saying. And I have to admit, in my early days of peaceful parenting, I think I was too caught up on the words too. And I think that's easy to have happen because the words can sound really different than conventional parenting.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be a bit of a learning curve as you're, transitioning to peaceful parenting with getting a little confused about what do you say? Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what we've learned is that peaceful parenting is a lot about two nervous systems interacting with each other. And the most important thing is just feeling with your child and being with your child. And when in doubt, don't say anything. Right? There's so much power in just quietly being with your child when something is happening and really listening to what they have to say and not worrying so much about what you're saying.
That's such a good point. And I always say to parents, because parents tend to talk too much when their kid's upset. I mean, as not everybody does, of course, but that is generally like a tendency of parents who are like talking too much when their kids are upset. Like if you were sitting with a friend who's just, someone important to them had just died, you would probably just be sitting quietly. You wouldn't be like, oh, so you must be feeling this way and you must be feeling that way. And like you wouldn't be narrating their grief, right? You would just be sitting with them like, I'm here with you. So yeah, scripts, not only are they unhelpful because often parents are not feeling what they're saying, but also because sometimes just the less you say, the better. Yeah. Well, I think we pretty much covered everything. Um, Maybe just finally we'll talk about like the perfectionism piece. Is that, we touched on this in and out of this conversation, but that idea that you have to be perfect. I remember I was talking to one of our members, Emma, shout out to Emma, and she had said, I just feel like I've been practicing this for so long and I'm just not getting it right. And I said, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I still yell at my kids. It's like, Emma, can you please go into the Facebook group and make a post that says, does anybody here still yell at their children? And she did. And she felt so much better. She was like, oh my gosh, I actually thought that I was not being a peaceful parent if I ever yelled at my children. And what she learned from that is that it actually, when she had that idea of like, okay, I don't have to be perfect, it actually helped her be more peaceful. Like, ironically, like she went in, she said, I realized I was going into every interaction with my children, like gritting my teeth, tensing my body because I was trying so hard not to yell. And I was so anxious and putting so much pressure on myself to stay calm that it was actually making me more reactive. Right.
Yes.
So it's that, no, you don't have to be perfect. You can repair when you mess up. You keep trying to work towards improving, work towards, getting more, taking care of yourself better, tweaking things around the house, whatever, so that you can stay more calm. But it's never about perfection, and perfectionism can actually get in the way of doing what you want to do.
Yes, 100%, which brought us right back to the big thesis of today is you don't have to be calm all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Seems that really is the big one we keep coming back to is you just have to be a perfectly imperfect human with your children. And there's that study, I know you often talk about this, the good enough parent.
Yeah. Yeah. The D.W. Winnicott from the 50s or 60s, where he was a psychologist, and he looked at what percentage of the time are we successful at meeting our children's needs. And I think he said about a third of the time we are able to meet our children's needs. About a third of the time we can't figure out what they are, and so we don't meet them. And about a third of the time we're just even unaware that they have needs, right? But that if 30% of the time, that 30% of the time of meeting their needs, what he called the good enough mother, and we can call that the good enough parent, raised children who were securely attached and developed healthily and psychologically. So really that, you don't have to be perfect, even 2/3 of the time, even if you're not perfect, it's enough.
Well, and in a coaching call you did recently too, you said to a parent, you're not going to you don't have to fix all the generational trauma in one go.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of us were raised with, brought on a lot of baggage from generations of parenting in a hard way. And so we don't have to break through all of that. We can just work as hard as we can to break some of those generational curses.
Totally. And I also, I just want to, when I do think about what is the heart of peaceful parenting, I want to just give a shout out to Vivek, who was one of our guests on the podcast talking about non-coercive parenting. And I think that it really comes down to treating children like people who matter, right? I saw one quote on Instagram that said gentle parenting is really just not treating children like crap, basically, and I think that is a lot of it too. It's just these are people, they're not very mature, they don't have very much life experience, and they make mistakes because they're still learning, but really they're just people who want to do well. They want to do well and they matter, right? So even just going on that, and you're going to be part of the way there in terms of peaceful parenting.
Yes. Reimagine.
Yes. Thanks so much, Corey. If anyone's interested in exploring the idea of one-on-one coaching, you can go to our new website, reimaginepeacefulparenting.com. Go to the coaching tab. All the information's there. You can book a call with me or Corey. You can book a free short consult with me if you want to learn more about coaching. And we are here for you. So thanks a lot, Corey. I hope we've cleared up I hope those influencers listen to our podcast about what peaceful parenting really is.
I feel better just getting this out there too.
Yeah, totally. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.